Welcome to Perspectives on Healthy Living. I'm Gabrielle Antolovich with Voices United in collaboration with the Pathway Society. And we have Anne Fifield, who's with the Addiction Recovery Center with us. And I know that people snicker about this a lot, which really makes me mad. But when we talk about sex addiction, what are we really talking about?
Well, there's lots of people that get into trouble with sex, of course. Historically, we can look back and see that, okay?
What do you mean by that?
Well, there's lots of people that have had mistresses and they found that out and then they got in the press and then they lost their jobs or whatever. So there's been that thing. But sex addiction.
But people think that having a mistress is normal.
In some cultures, that's correct.
Right.
So when we're talking about sex addiction, we're talking about a man or a woman who's been so altered by that compulsive, obsessive behavior over time that they've lost the ability to not do it. They've lost the ability to say no, to have a choice over their behavior. And their brain has actually been altered by the continued use of a sexual experience. And therefore, we think of them as having an addiction, because they've become dependent on the behavior in order to function, which we could say about any kind of addiction, okay?
Right.
And it's usually up there about 10% of people. So it isn't a big population, but there are people that need extra help to find a way to stop, because the behavior now has caused such consequences that now they want to be able to stop, and then they find they can't. So then they come looking for help.
So really, you know, in our culture, in, say, the American or Western culture, it seems normal. Maybe people say it's morally wrong, but it seems normal for a heterosexual male to have an affair with the secretary or see a prostitute, or, you know, people are never surprised when a man has an affair on his wife.
Well, I think I would differ with that and say that there are people who are surprised and are very, very wounded by that behavior.
Oh yes, people are hurt and wounded, but not surprised that it happens.
Okay.
Because it seems so prevalent, more than the 10% that you're saying.
All right, so if we think about a continuum of behavior, okay, we think about people who don't do anything, people who do something occasionally, people who start to do things and start to have consequences, okay? Then there's people who abuse something, who do it a lot and start to get into real serious difficulty. But when confronted with the consequences of their behavior, they lose their job, their wife threatens to leave them, they've run the kids' scholarship or college fund dry.
Or they're exposed in the press.
They stop. They retain the ability to do it. But we're talking about that upper 10% who continue to go back to it in spite of the consequences, okay? And you're correct that in our society, in fact in the world, pornography is kind of a given, unless we're talking about child pornography, which is another whole topic.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's not even pornography, it's just sexual behaviors, you know? It's, even though the standard is monogamy, but people are having affairs, you know, with other people, and that's not monogamy.
True, but most of our folks that come looking for help, it isn't about sex with others, although prostitutes might play a part in that, massage
or
parlors.
Having an affair.
Yes, but that's really the minority. Most of our folks are in trouble because of online pornography.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Online pornography?
Online pornography, okay? Because they get to watching it, you know, and it overtakes their ability to stop. And so if they're watching something online or their videos, I mean, that's kind of passé now, because you can get anything you want on online.
I know, and you can get it on your phone.
On your phone.
You know, it's like, I mean, can you imagine? You're well, anywhere.
Yes, you can. And
Yeah.
that's the unfortunate part of it, because your addiction travels with you.
I know.
You don't have to go to the bar or go find somebody to sell you some heroin. It's right in your hip pocket or your purse. So you've got it with you. But if you're always going to the pornography in order to have a sexually altering experience, whether you
Right.
masturbate or not,
Yeah.
okay, that's how you cope and feel normal.
Huh.
So if you think about the brain chemistry and what's
Right.
going on with that, we don't need to take something from the outside like an alcoholic would. We're using our own brain chemistry. So
Right.
sex addiction's not about our genitals, it's about what's going on up here. Okay, and there's a part of the limbic system in the brain which sits right on top of the brain stem.
You mean
yes,
up here?
up here, right in the back, okay?
Yeah.
We call it the lizard brain, okay? Okay, and it's all about food. We have to eat to live, we have to drink water to live, and sex is a part of that too, those three.
Although
And
we
so
don't
it's very
die
basic.
without sex, but we can't
But it's
live
a piece,
without it.
But it's a piece of our humanity,
Yeah.
is to procreate.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and that's
that
why
gets
we
hijacked.
can't live without it.
Well, it gets hijacked, and so we're
Yeah.
using it inappropriately.
Huh.
Like we can use food inappropriately.
Right.
Okay, so that's the problem, is that the brain gets changed by chronic repetitive behaviors. We could look at gambling as another way of understanding this. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you get the thrill of the first time you win.
Yes, and then you're looking for it all the
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, the question really is, how come a man or a woman goes down that road to sex addiction?
Right.
What predisposes that person from doing that rather than, say, alcohol or methamphetamine or
Well, what
marijuana or
does?
whatever? It's early childhood sexual abuse.
Really? Oh.
Yes. Now, how do we define abuse?
Yeah.
We all think of rape, okay? All right, that could be true.
Well, wouldn't inappropriate touching and
Yes.
creepy...
Yes, yes. And early exposure to sexual material before the child can understand what's going on.
Oh, you mean like Playboy magazine?
Yes, and
Right.
that's
Yeah.
fading out because now we have the computer. And if dad's looking at
Here
porn,
we go, back to that
yeah,
cell phone.
or the cell phone.
Yeah. Oh,
So if
wow.
it's in the home, or Uncle George comes to visit, or the older kid in the block, or the priest, or the coach,
Yeah.
or exposes a child to sexual material before that child's ready to handle it, it imprints.
Oh.
It imprints. And so when that child's hormonal world catches up with it, then there's a connection.
Oh,
And
it
so-
imprints then to that old
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. And so that's
Wow.
why they go down that road,
As
okay,
opposed to
another
anything
road.
else.
Yeah. Because addiction, whatever it is, as you know, is really a coping mechanism gone awry. It
Yeah.
finally takes over.
Yeah.
You know, so our society is alcohol saturated, okay? But we have alcoholics.
Yeah.
Okay, we have
It's
people
nicotine saturated.
and nicotine
And
saturated.
it's slowly becoming marijuana saturated.
Yes, and caffeine.
And caffeine saturated.
That's right.
And chocolate saturated.
Yes, yes. Let's not go talk about chocolate.
But it
It's
is part of
there.
it.
Yes, yes.
So, you know, in the middle of what you were saying is there's the attraction to sex itself, and then there's having addictive relationships. Are they two different kinds of sexual addiction? Is
You're
one
just-
a relationship addiction around sex?
No,
Oh, no.
Because you can have a nurturing fantasy affair with a screen image, and it just as easily as you can with the masseuse
real
or the
person.
prostitute or
Yeah.
the woman in the office. Now,
Or the man in the office.
or the man in the office.
Depending on your predilection.
Well, and some guys go that direction, and there's a lot of clinical work behind that, why they are looking for a body physically rather than the online. And then we've got online folks that never would go to a prostitute or a massage parlor. So it really...
Or have an affair.
Or have an affair.
Yeah.
But they have the affair with the computer.
Wow. So really it's all about the brain chemistry,
all about the brain
whether
chemistry.
it's someone you think you're falling in love with and having this crazy sexual affair with, or if it's online pornography, or you know, you're hooked on your cell phone. So it's all the same brain chemistry going
That's right.
on.
It's just a different way. Some people like beer, some people like wine, some people like bourbon.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of taste.
Or tequila.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a matter of taste and opportunity. Okay.
Yeah, and access.
Yeah.
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 Whoa.
But the problem of recovery is we have to give that person tools to cope with the stresses of life, to substitute for using any kind of sexual behavior. Okay. True for any addiction recovery. That's the first step. The long-term work, though, is finding out how come they went down the road and what kind of trauma was there. And we have to deal with the trauma eventually, not in the beginning, because we don't want to catapult them back into relapse. So
is sexual trauma more difficult to confront than other reasons for getting into any kind of addiction?
more difficult in that it takes more skill to help that person. Because remember, if a child is sexually harmed young, they don't have a lot of language for what happened. It's encoded in their bodies as a feeling memory. And so it takes something like EMDR, for example, to work that out.
Can you explain EMDR?
EMDR.
That's such an important therapeutic process.
Yes, and we use it in our program because what we're trying to do is help the brain re-experience the trauma in a safe way, guided, so that the brain can reprocess it now with somebody they can talk to about it, and then the brain does what the brain does so well, is puts it back into long-term storage, and it's not right in front driving the person into doing a behavior trying to cope with the unexpressed pain from what happened.
Right, and does then, are you better able to let go of the feeling?
Yes, because you experience, feelings are pieces of information.
Right.
Okay? So if you pay attention to the piece of information, you deal with it.
Rather than be afraid of it and
or
shove
stuff
it
it
down.
hide or drink it away or sex it away.
Right.
Yeah.
So EMDR brings it up and then you get to let it go.
Yes, you get to let it go.
Yeah.
And the brain really does. They take scans of the brain before and after, and the brain actually changes. It's amazing. Okay? The good news is this can change. You know, we're not stuck with what we've done damage to it, either through behaviors or chemicals, or what happened to us as children. We can change, and that's the good news.
Well, what's miraculous in a way about EMDR is, you know, the rapid eye movement and how impactful that can be in, like you said, rearranging.
Reorganizing.
It's almost like the left brain, the right brain start talking to each other.
That's right.
Usually they're separated. And that in itself is miraculous. And I'm glad that that therapy is part of it because it's so hard to come to terms with. Sometimes, you know, if it was your priest or your father or mother or whatever.
Right. That's a tough one. You know, because the person you're depending upon for care, naturally and healthfully so, is the one who's harming you. So where do you go? Who do you turn to? And children know there is no one. So they stuff it, and then they learn how to cope. And children, when they're very young, don't have much to draw from if they're not getting good coping help from their parents. They have the cookie jar, they have fantasy, and they can rub their genitals. It isn't about sex, it's about feel good, and it's about calming down. And so lots of children learn to do that in order to sleep. And so, okay, what's going on here? More imprinting. So when it gets bad and I get afraid, if I do this, then I calm down and I can be all right again. So lots of early imprinting that we have to seek out, identify, and change, and give them healthy coping, which is where 12-step programs come in, good therapy comes in, You know, we do a lot of psychoeducational in the beginning because we're trying to help people understand